It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That's Alan Saunders, riding shotgun with us today. Honestly, been on a few road trips with us already. Chris Carter, what's going on, Chris?
What's up, boys? How we doing?
I feel like the intro hits a little different now that we've had Brandon Rossi on the show also. It's just like, that's our guy. So that was cool. I'm into that now.
I will say, clearly there's there's levels to this with the voice, right? Like his talking voice is not the voice that I hear exactly when he's doing, like, it's almost getting into character to do that voiceover.
Yes, it's good. So the reaction to Brandon was very good. We had lots of good comments. You have to let us know what you think of Chris Carter, who I know everybody knows, but maybe we'll get into a little bit more deeply. And Smitty, we're going to talk about what happened last night, both on the stage in Las Vegas and also me fighting with people on the internet, because apparently I was the main character, which you generally do not want to be, but I feel like it was a good time. So I'm all about it.
You were the main character. The NFL honors taking place last night. We got some stuff that Steeler fans are going to love hearing about, and also they're going to hate hearing about, and have been complaining about now for 24-ish hours. Writing was kind of on the wall with Defensive Player of the Year, felt like, not just yesterday specifically, but going back a few weeks, but especially yesterday when you see TJ Watt puts up an Instagram story playing hooky, not even at the NFL honors. Then he tweets, nothing I'm not used to. Myles Garrett of the AFC North division rival Cleveland Browns takes home his first Defensive Player of the Year award. And Alan, you said yesterday, this honestly for you, this honestly one of my favorite rivalries right now in sports, you versus PFF, goes back longer than just last night. But Myles
it has
Garrett
nothing to do with Myles Garrett and TJ Watt for me.
Sure.
I just really hate the influence of PFF in the football conversation, because it's not analytics. It's just a subjective opinion. It's not backed up by math or science. And I think people talk about it like this is the same kind of revolution that we had in baseball, where it's like war, or it's like sabermetrics, where, like the pitcher with the most wins doesn't get the Cy Young award anymore. And it's not that. It's just a bunch of dumbasses with their own opinion that they put out there like it's science, and it's not. And now they've convinced other people that their opinion is more important than the things that we've based this award on for 50 years. And by the way, that we know are important. We know sacks are important. When you get a sack, the play ends and it's over, and the offense loses yards, and there's a tangible impact that happens there. But instead, we're gonna obsess ourselves with this specious win rate, and that is literally the only thing that Myles Garrett has over TJ Watt. TJ had more sacks, he had more quarterback hits, he had more interceptions, he had more pass defending, he had more forced fumbles, he had more fumble recovers. Every single stat out there, TJ Watt dominated not only Myles Garrett, but Micah Parsons, Max Crosby, the whole rest of the field in terms of edge rushers. It is just this one thing that somebody came up with and invented on their own with no evidence or proof that it's valuable, that has changed the entire tone of the conversation about this position. And it makes me insane. I cannot stand that. It's fake. If it was you guys know me, I covered baseball. I covered all kinds of sabermetric stuff in baseball. I would love to cover football the same way I covered baseball, but this is not that. And the fact that we're to the point where we're giving people major NFL awards because of what some jerk's opinion is, it drives me up a wall. I can't stand it.
Chris, good luck following that up, but I wanted to get your thoughts on it as well.
I was just going to be like, let me step back, let me put on some oven mittens and just just get prepared, because that was just a flamethrower. But in all seriousness, I was not wrong. What are we doing here? What are we doing here when the pass rush win rate is the stat that's more important than the actual sacks, than the actual tackles for loss, than the actual pressures? That's another thing. Because if you want to say, well, hey, you know what? Myles Garrett impacts the play more often than TJ. He gets into the backfield more often. He pressures the quarterback more often. He does it. And what's really funny and shout out to Daniel Valente, because he does a lot of the stats stuff and he posts a lot of it. And he posted comparisons, which I'm starting to now use because I subscribe to Sports Information Systems. Shout out to Alan and Nick for helping me figure out using them, because they are also there. I think they're a lot better.
Actual analytics,
right?
That's what that, not PFF.
Yeah, not PFF. And they have some of the same stats as PFF, but like they just don't do all the grading nonsense. But Sports Information Systems, if you look at how things were rated, if you look at the NFL's official pressure count has Watt at 50 and Garrett at 37. But there are certain things that the NFL doesn't officially count as a pressure. And so, in PFF, it was, they had it 86 to 86. Watt and Garrett had the same amount of pressures all season long. But if you look at Sports Information Systems, Watt had 85, Garrett had 76. So like there's, even in Sports Information System, another official analytics calculator thing that NFL teams subscribe to and use just like they do for PFF, even they said, Watt had significantly more than Garrett. And they also said Watt's pressure percentage was higher than Garrett's, in that he pressured if you want to say, oh, well, Watt just was on the field more times to blitz the quarterback. Okay, well, even in the times that he did, he had a higher percentage of creating pressure. The only outlet that even may fix their stats to say that Garrett was on the same level as TJ Watt was PFF. And I think you look around, PFF was the main identity that was pushing this narrative before the season even started.
There is zero chance that if PFF does not exist, that Myles Garrett would have even been in the top 3 for this award.
I agree. I mean, you go back
and he
to
didn't deserve to be either. He did not deserve to be, because Max Crosby and Micah Parsons are both better too.
And I'll say this too, like pressure-wise, according to NFL stats, Myles Garrett finished officially, according to the NFL, like the NFL's actual stats, 37 pressures. That is 71st all time. Like since pressures were counted, there are 70 other players who have finished with more pressures in the NFL. What are we doing here if that's what's allowed to be the top thing here? So again, I look at that and I say, you go back to even just week 2, you could see this being developed when the Steelers played the Browns, and PFF officially gave Myles Garrett a higher defensive grade for that specific game, not the whole season, not over 4 weeks, for one game where these two teams went up against each other. PFF gave a higher grade for Myles Garrett than he did for Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. And in that game, Myles Garrett got a tackle and 3 pressures. He was there, he was present, and he was good in that game. But according to PFF, that 1 tackle and 3 pressures are better than TJ Watt's 4 tackles, 1 sack, 7 pressures, a pass broken up, a fumble recovered, and a fumble taken back for a touchdown. And Alex Highsmith, 7 tackles, 1 sack, 6 pressures, 1 forced fumble that resulted in a touchdown, and an interception that was also returned for a touchdown. So in that game alone, Myles Garrett by PFF was deemed to be better than a player playing the exact same position. And if you want to say, well, TJ Watt goes up against right tackles, guess who Alex Highsmith gets to go up against then?
And those two guys single-handedly won the game for the Steelers. They single-handedly won the game. The Steelers did nothing outside of Alex Highsmith and TJ Watt. They win the game because of them. And the other part of it that drives me, look, I'm not saying that we can't do better than the traditional NFL counting stats. I think it's out there. I think it could exist. I'm not saying that those metrics are the perfect encapsulation, but it's the hubris of the sureness that what they have is better with zero evidence to back it up. And they don't even, so you're saying like PFF tracks their own stats, their own pressures, their own sacks, right? They do their own counting of pressures and sacks. Every other outlet that does that, whether it's the official NFL stats or whether it's SIS, gives us the play level data where we can look and say, okay, the NFL counted this as a sack and SIS didn't, and the NFL counted this as a pressure and SIS didn't, or the other way around. PFF won't even show their own work. They just say he had more pressures, trust us. They don't even tell. We can't even go back and look at like, oh, they said this is a pressure, and then they could just sit there and add numbers to the count, and no one would ever know because you can't even look at what they're doing. Not only do I not like PFF's product, I absolutely believe that PFF likes the attention it gets from this debate and is intentionally skewing its results to favor Myles Garrett and disfavor TJ Watt in terms of things like grades. Absolutely. When you're talking about Dan Moore getting a 0 for going up against Myles Garrett, asinine. There's no way that was honestly graded and they came up with that number. That is a number that is intentionally created to draw attention to themselves. I 100% believe that they do that, and it's crap. And I hate everything to do with that company and everything they stand for.
I won't name my source here, but I'll say it this way. There's a guy who I'm friends with who works for works with a major Power 5 college football program who that program uses PFF's analytics for certain things. And they even said like, hey, the hard stats, that's useful in the way that we can use some of the databases. And I said, so what about their grades? And he literally laughed and he said, nobody cares about that. He said, and literally, we even tested them out and we sat next to their grader and we asked them, oh, you gave this person a negative play on this pass play, but did you know what their assignment was? And they said, oh, he was doing this. And they said, no, that's not what he was doing. It's not even close to what he was doing. And they said they sat through him for like multiple games and the guy was just completely wrong about so many of his positive or negative grades that led to those final grades of, oh, he has a 95.8 great PFF grade for that game or for the season or for whatever. And that's the thing is that, like you said, Alan, they're the Wizard of Oz. They're behind the curtain cranking things. Don't stare at that man behind the curtain. They're making things up and then just profiting as facts and then just say, hey, and some people are like, maybe there is something there. And if it was years ago, because I remember this thing's been going on for years between the TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. It's very much been a historical thing to this point. But if it was, I think this all started back in 2019 when Steelers fans were starting to make the serious push for TJ Watt to be Defensive Player of the Year. He didn't win it then. He had 14.5 sacks, and there was reasons behind him not getting it then. But in that same year, Myles Garrett finished with 10 sacks, also got suspended for the last few games of the season because he attacked Mason Rudolph that season. But there was a push made by this pass rush win rate thing that PFF was pointing out, saying these are predictive stats. Listen, we're saying that if Myles Garrett and TJ Watt played the same amount of pass rush snaps, this would show that Myles Garrett would just win more, would get more sacks if they were in these situations the same way. And so that over time, you will see, and that was PFF, so over time, you'll see Myles Garrett will get more sacks than TJ Watt. Well, then
where's it at? Where's it at?
2020 didn't happen. 2021 didn't happen. 2022, TJ Watt misses half the season. It finally happened. 2023 didn't happen. So 3 of the 4 years since that year.
They keep saying that it's predictive, but it's not. And TJ Watt keeps proving that it's not predictive because they're wrong about the fact that, if these guys keep doing that. No, what the difference is that TJ Watt is simply better at finishing the play than Myles Garrett is. And that if you get those two guys around their linemen the same amount of times, TJ Watt will get more sacks. And guess what? The name of the game at that position is not get around the lineman. It's sack the quarterback. Yep. And that is a skill and a part of the game that they are just choosing to ignore. I don't know why, but maybe because they can't find a way to encapsulate it mathematically, but it exists and they just pretend like it doesn't.
I'm right with you, Alan. There's no legitimate, logically based argument on their side at this point, other than just vibes and feelings. That's the only thing they can add here. And again, like I saw Marcus Mosher was saying, "I'll sit down with you, Alan," and listen, like Marcus is a locked on guy, just like me. I'm sorry, you're full of it. We've sat down.
I don't need you to sit there and you watch the film. And it's the problem is the entire concept is flawed because there is no mathematical evidence to believe it should be true. And unless you can show me that, I don't have any interest in sitting down and wasting my time with you. Smitty, you're still here. I want to get you back in this conversation. TJ Watt skips the ceremony, is not there when Cam Heyward wins the Walter Payton Man of the Year award because of that. You okay with that?
That's an interesting question. I wasn't expecting that. I thought we were just going to go right into the fact that Cam Heyward won the Walter Payton Man of
This
the
was
Year.
my transition in between. But I feel like this is, like, in general, I don't really care about TJ Watt blowing off an award that he wasn't winning. But his teammate won the most prestigious individual award you can win in the NFL, and he wasn't there in attendance for it because he was mad about losing to Myles Garrett. And I think he's right to be mad about losing to Myles Garrett, but I don't know about this one.
Yeah, you might be able to talk me into feeling a little bit different. Well, again, I didn't even have an opinion on this because that didn't even cross my mind. So really, Najee Harris, Mike Tomlin, they were the only two other Steelers representatives in attendance.
I think Omar was there too. And Omar was
okay.
There.
Yeah, I mean, Joey Porter Jr., I guess as well.
Oh yeah, Joey, and of course, like Angela from the PR staff and Bert and Blair from their community relations staff were all there too. But like in terms of like people that are on the roster,
that's tough. Do you look at it similarly to I don't want to change the conversation or it seem like I'm deflecting an answer or try to make a comparison that's not there. But like I know Sidney Crosby got a lot of flack for not taking part in the players draft or whatever, or being available to the media ahead of the All-Star game, and people were making a big deal about that. He was doing his own thing prior to the game. Is there a comparison to be made there? And if so, I think it'd be hypocritical of me to say that I have an issue then with TJ because I said I didn't have an issue with Crosby not being available in that situation. So I don't know. That might have to. I don't want to be a hypocrite, but I would have liked for TJ really to have been there
because Crosby's just being available to the media there. Like this is more about his teammate, right? About the guy, he plays across the line from winning that award. I don't know, Chris. What's your thoughts?
I mean. I look at this as multiple situations. Like those are different. Like there's a point to be made about from TJ Watt here, and if he just sits there and takes it, he could be a good sport about it and just be like, what, it's it's fine. But I think it'd be different if Myles Garrett was like right neck and neck with him. Like if Myles Garrett had 2 less sacks, but 3 more tackles for loss, and they had around the same pass breakups and, the same, and like they were close in run stuffs and tackles and all this. It'd be cool if they went back and forth. I think you'd have arguments there. Like how Deron Bland, if he got it, I don't think I think Steelers fans might have claimed it a little bit, but they'd have been like, you know what?
I'd have been fine with Deron Bland winning. I honestly think that Deron Bland should have won.
And that's where I'm like, if he had gotten it, would have made sense, and it would have. But I mean, it is a slap in the face for him. Like even when Aaron Donald got it, you say, okay, well, you know what? Aaron Donald's a defensive tackle, and he's attracting 3 guys at the same time, and he's still getting double-digit sacks. That's a whole different situation, and I can see that because. But TJ Watt's point is, we play the same position, we do same division,
so same
we play a lot
schedule,
of the same
basically.
teams, basically, and also thing is on top of that, TJ Watt drops back into coverage and is good at doing it. Had an interception that changed a game that the Steelers needed to win for their playoff hopes to stay alive against a good, maybe Hall of Fame quarterback someday in Matt Stafford, who's won a Super Bowl. So like, again, he does more on the field while being better at Myles Garrett's job. Like I had this conversation with Brian Batko, because he brought up how, we were talking about this on the North Shore Drive podcast, and he said Steelers fans may think that that stats are the only thing that matter, but you wouldn't make that argument over Troy Polamalu and Ed Reed. And I'm like, those are 2 different things. Ed Reed was a center fielding free safety who naturally was in position to make a lot of those interceptions. Troy Polamalu would go man to man in the slot, would play in the box, would attack downfield. He would blitz a lot more than Ed Reed. Like that's a very different thing compared to 2 guys that line up at the line of scrimmage almost every single play. And the guy who you're arguing for that the stats, shouldn't matter as much for is the guy who blitzes more often because he's not dropping back into coverage. Point being, I'm like the anti-stats argument, the anti-production argument, it don't make sense. And I get TJ Watt sitting out and saying, you know what, if my work is that devalued, and again, there were also people that didn't even vote for TJ Watt to be in the top 3. I think there were 8 total votes that excluded him as a top 3 defensive player. That's a slap in the face, and I think it's also. It's just another sign of like, hey, there's something going on there with the voters that are trying to make a point. If you think that Deron Bland was the better defensive player, fine, no arguments here. Like that's a you have that perspective and respectable. If you think TJ Watt was one of the best 3 defensive players in football, you're out of your damn mind. And if TJ Watt's sitting out for that reason, I get it. And I also think Cam Heyward gets it. And he's like, you know what? TJ, go do your thing. So I don't think anyone can be mad at TJ. He's making a good point. I think if Cam Heyward wasn't up for Walter Payton Man if he wasn't he didn't have a shot at winning the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, maybe the Steelers follow him out the door because that was certain. I think that they're trying to make a point that they continue to get disrespected in those regards.
That's true. Maybe there was a conversation had between Cam and TJ. Like maybe Cam knew ahead of time and gave
he probably
him,
did.
Yeah. TJ wasn't going to be there. Yeah. You
I
know what? I'm back on the train. I don't care that TJ wasn't there.
I thought it was a bit of a weird look to have Cam win that and TJ not be there. But I think I sympathize with TJ. Also, I think it's personal with Myles Garrett because of not just the rivalry, but the history with Mason Rudolph. I think specifically losing to that guy makes it a little bit different. I think if it was Micah Parsons, probably would not have been that reaction.
Yeah, I do want to, shine a light more on Cam Heyward because I feel like we started that transition and somehow came back to the TJ thing and stuff like that. Cam Heyward winning Walter Payton Man of the Year after several years being up for it. I really thought last year was going to be the year, but Dak Prescott very deserving of the award as well for everything that he's done. But it finally happens for Cam. I think the three of us specifically are very well aware of everything that he does within the community. So finally, great to see him get that honor. Any thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a heck of. I think he's a guy he could have getting. I don't know. I don't know the metrics of how Walter Payton Man of the Year because how do you quantify? That's a good point. Yeah, how much?
I don't know. It's ask PFF
community. Yeah, jeez. But point being, I don't know how you quantify community involvement outside of when JJ Watt was helping people in the middle of a hurricane, or when the Manning brothers when Katrina hit New Orleans and they were down there, that kind of stuff is oh man, they're in disaster relief and they're helping things out. But how much is one person's Thanksgiving, making sure all these families have dinner for Thanksgiving versus a person who's in schools every week, that's tough, man, because then we're starting to, are we grading people based on on how well they help the community? Are we great? That's everyone helping communities and helping people in need is a great service, and winning awards for that can be tough. I think this is more of a tool. This has always been more of a tool for the NFL to get out the message that, hey, we do a lot of charity work. Here's some of our best charity work guys around the league, and getting that conversation out there. And it's great for that promotion. So I'm not so sure Cam Heyward not getting it in the 5 times before this one that is like a diss to him. It might have just been a, hey, there might be a political understanding of hey, it's this person's turn in line, or this was the great story of the year that touched so many hearts. And I think Cam Heyward, I think it was Mike DeFabo who said I think this might be more of a lifetime achievement award because he's done it for so many years. And I think that would be the difference if Cam Heyward did this 2 or 3 times, made major pushes in local communities here in Pittsburgh, and then that was it. Well, then he probably wouldn't have won the award. But the fact that he's been doing this year in and year out and just has been doing it for the good of his, out of the good of his heart, I think that speaks a lot to who Cam Heyward is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because they call it the Walter Payton Man of the Year award, but it is absolutely a lifetime achievement award, and I don't think anyone's ever won it twice, right? I mean, that's sort of that's what tells you right there that this is absolutely a lifetime achievement award, and good on Cam for getting it, man. And I'll tell you what, I thought the way that he the presentation was constructed around him going to the Caring Place in Pittsburgh, which he did during his Cam's Kindness Week, which he takes his bye week every year to go do charitable things, which I think is incredible, especially as a guy, playing at his age in the NFL, where I guarantee that'd be a week where he'd like to spend it in the tub, to go out there. And the very first thing that you hear on the screen is what would you tell your dad if you could talk to him right now? And I'm like, man, as someone, I lost my dad when I was 15. I went to the Caring Place as a kid, and man, I think it really just centers who Cam is as a person, the way he approaches things, why he's so valuable to this team, this community. Man, I got into it with some Steelers fans earlier this offseason because there are people that are telling me oh, get rid of him. I'm like, man, you don't throw that guy away. Like that is a heart and soul guy. And not to mention, I think he can still play really well. But that guy is in so many ways the conscience of this team and of this organization. And I think he brings so much to the table. He's not necessarily guys have different leadership personalities. He's not going to be Jack Lambert or Joe Green, where he's going to get in people's faces and rant and rave and spit in the mouth and that kind of thing. But if you need a North Star as a franchise, someone that everyone can look up to and you can hold up as the example, you can't do much better than Cam Heyward.
Yeah, I think that Chris made a good point there too when he was talking, that made me kind of reflect back on the way that I worded that about Cam being deserving. I think the way that Cam's acceptance speech was basically like saying like it could have been any of the candidates. Like there is no more or less deserving like it within that group. So if the guy is lucky enough to win it, he obviously feels blessed, but everybody just keep doing the exact same thing that you're doing, continue to help out. And it just seems like one of those things where everybody's kind of gets their turn for continuing to do these charitable things. Chris, I want to talk about you now. We went from talking about TJ and Myles to Cam Heyward to Chris Carter. What we do in the third segment-ish type thing on this show recently when people are riding shotgun.
We would have to have sponsors to have breaks. We're not that
Yeah, okay.
We're not there
last
yet.
10 minutes or so of the show, when somebody rides shotgun with us, we talked to them about, their journey and everything that they're doing, what they're up to, how they got to where they are, what your inspirations are. So I think most people know what you're doing right now, but, with Post Gazette, Locked On, all the great stuff that you've been doing. But like, how do we get here? Because I think that you have an interesting background that not everybody knows about.
Oh, sure. Well, for those who don't know, I think some people have known, but for those who don't know, I didn't start in journalism for my career. I got a law degree.
Mm-hmm.
I did political science in undergrad at Cheney University, the first HBCU. Started there, went to Pitt for law school, graduated there, worked in the legal field for some time. But like while I was in law school, I needed some just money for just going out, for doing stuff. I had money to like survive, but like, I had a girlfriend and I wanted to be able to take her out and do things. And so my mom sends me a Craigslist ad, and it's Steelers writer for like $100 a month or something like that. And she was like, you do that. You talk about Steelers in your sleep. So like, why not? And so I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? And I sent like an essay, and the person who was running it was like, call me back. And it was like, who is this? Like, because the one thing I always had was I loved sport. I always read so many different sports journalists. I checked out their writing. I checked out how they talked about sports. And I wrote a lot for my job, political science. Like all we did was write. And then in law school, all we did was write. And so like, I can think out a whole 20-page paper in just a few hours of just going through stuff. So like when it came to sports, that came natural to me. So then I picked that up, and it was just something I did on the side for fun, for some years. And then got that role kind of increased a little bit, started doing some podcasts with Behind the Steel Curtain. And like that grew a great relationship with Jeff Hartman there and all the things that they did. There at Behind the Steel Curtain. And then it was like 2016, I get a DM from Dejan Kovacevic, and he says, hey, want to work for me? And I was like, sure. Let's meet up. So he invites me to his office. We sit down, and it was still a part-time job, but it was a significant pay bump from what I was making. And I was allowed to keep my legal work. So I was able to, I kept working for different firms. And I was bouncing around a lot of the time. I worked downtown. I worked for a firm out in West Virginia for a little over a year. I worked all over the place for a while. Just kind of, when you're young in the legal market, it's not easy to stick in places sometimes. And I was experiencing that. And right around the pandemic time was when Dejan offered me to go on full time, and so I did. I did that for some years, and then. I think it was like 2021 or 2022. I always mix up my years. I think it was 2022 was when I was starting to hear the rumblings that there might be an opportunity at the Post Gazette, and that I have a decent shot to make it. But I also was interested in working with you guys, so I worked for you guys for a little bit. I think it was like 3 or 4 months, I think. I was with you guys. And then when the Post-Gazette job came calling, I had to take that. It was too much of an opportunity to not pass up. And
Benedict
yeah,
Arnold over here.
What'd you say? Yeah, I did feel bad because I was like, we were at training camp. We made a whole training camp plan. Like, and also like, I knew I was working with Alan and Nick, two of the guys I respect a whole ton in this, media district or in whatever we call our Pittsburgh media group. But, I was excited to work with that group, but like the Post-Gazette, just the opportunity to work at the paper of record for the city was too good of an opportunity to pass up. And I was happy to do that. I also, I developed my podcasting presence, honestly, like out of necessity, but also out of kind of luck. It was the 2018 training camp. That's what it was. It was the 2018 training camp. I'm there, and it's my second full training camp of covering it, and I'm there for DK. And I see this, and at this point, like I was kind of like I'd gotten to know people who were there, but I wanted to make a point to get to know people who, obviously were kind of new, kind of like me. And I see this guy walking around, kind of like looking, obviously like he doesn't know people, like guys like Dale Lally and Mark Caboli, guys that are always around, guys like Alan, guys that have been around and know people. And so I was like, hey man, what's going on? My name's Chris. And he's like, oh, I'm Tony. And it turned out it was Tony Serino, who was the host of Locked On Steelers at the time. And for the next year, Tony would bring me on like once a month or so. And we were just talking. And then in 2019, he hits me up and he's like, hey, every time you're on my show, it does numbers. So what if we co-host? And I was like, sounds great to me. And honestly, that did so much for my career because Tony bringing me on there gave me an independent voice where, like, with DK, I had, if I wrote something, it would get, it could be that the title could get changed. A lot of other stuff could get changed. And my voice wasn't always my voice there, but it Locked On, it was. And it also gave me the power to kind of earn, not earn a salary, but earn my own money. Like, with the way that we're paid at Locked On, it was always based off of your own numbers. And that allowed me to kind of, get a little bit of strength in any negotiations. And that allowed me to kind of say, like, you know what, I can find something that pays the level that I think I should be paid for my written work and for what I do for the place that I write for. And I thank Tony for getting me into Locked On. He eventually ended up leaving because he had his own, professional stuff he wanted to do. And then I kind of took it on its own and grew it to what it is today. But I have a lot of thanks to Tony and to David Locke and to Ross Jackson, all the people that Locked On, because they were just as much a part of my growth as anyone. And it's funny, I go around and, I'm at Steelers training camp and people will say, it's Chris from Locked On. And I'm like, I work with the Post-Gazette. Like, remember that. Like
people go on and say, hey, I love it when you're on with Chris Carter. And I'm like, I got my own whole website, man. Like, why I gotta be... I mean, I'll appreciate it, but
I appreciate it.
You can't say I love all your words. Like, come on. I get it all the time. Chris, yeah. I want to, one more thing, and we're already over, sure. But who cares? I want to get introspective a little bit. You were trained to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
But your father was an educator.
Yes.
And I got to be honest, when I read your stuff and when I'm on the podcast with you at Locked On Steelers, I see a lot more of an educator than a lawyer. You are not argumentative. You are instructive. Do you see that in yourself? And is that the first time anyone's brought that up to you?
No, it's not. I very much take after my father, and I do after my mother too. Like my mother was, she was a research specialist. She did a lot of studies for UPMC and Pitt over the years. But like, I think I was always raised with the idea. My dad was also a coach, so I'm a coach's son, and like almost everything that I ever did, it was instructional, and I feel like that was always a better way to talk about something with people that were trying to learn from you. And so that's why like a lot of my shows aren't me yelling at you about this because it's just disrespectful, unless you're talking about TJ Watt and Myles Garrett, then it is disrespectful. But most of my shows aren't about that because I feel like there's too much of that in today's media. And not that that's bad, that's entertaining. It's fun. I get that. But I don't think I would have made a name for myself the way I have today by trying to copy that. I had to be myself. And myself is a person who I think tries to have educational conversations, whether I'm teaching or I'm learning or I'm just exploring. Because that's the other thing is that like sometimes it's all of us learning together. Like I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know who Zach Azzani was until I was like, oh, okay, he's a candidate. All right, let me see who he is. And then when they hired him, I'm like, I guess I really got to know who he is. Okay, cool. And then I looked up some stuff like, all right, let me explain to you. And I'll tell people like, listen, I'm not saying this guy's gonna be good. I don't know him from Adam, other than his track record. But most people don't either. And they'll go out there and say, Zach Azzani, terrible hire. Zach Azzani, great hire. And they don't know whether it is. I'm not saying some people do know.
The first name.
Yeah. That's the first name. But
Zach, wide receivers coach, Smith, offensive coordinator.
They
guaranteed to work.
In my opinion, the Steelers have already nailed this offseason, despite how the draft and free agency go.
There you go. But there is a bit of my dad in me in that. And honestly, that's something that like my dad used to love watching sports reporters, the show on ESPN that would come on every Sunday morning. He used to love it, but he used to hate watch it because he would just hate some of the terrible takes and aggressive things that were said on there. And he was just like, what? Like, and eventually my mom was like, why do you watch that if it makes you mad? And my dad kind of had to take a step back and be like, that's a good question. And then he realized he didn't need it anymore because he was just like, it's argumentative to be argumentative. And that's where like, I will make an argument when it's time to argue about something. But most of my shows, most of my work, I want to expose the people to my insight, to things that I've learned, to things that I don't know yet, and that I'm trying to learn and get you somewhere else in the journey. I think that's what journalism's supposed to be about. And that's why I've kind of fallen in love with this business is that, I think that I've done it and I've done it to the level that enough people want more of that puts me in high demand here. And I won't say high demand, but in high enough demand that I'm
high demand. I'll say high demand. There you go. I'll say it.
But
I'll say it. And that's it, and it works really well too, because you can be the educator and then you can just have me on to scream when you need someone to come scream and rant and rave. It works.
I like having
it works really well. And not that I don't like educating people too. I just am a lot quicker to anger, I think. Did I see you pull out a your mom joke on Twitter yesterday?
You did.
There's a Browns fan who goes by Johnny Breadstick on Twitter that just is just a total troll. And I've decided that this year that since Elon can't fix the website and get rid of the trolls, that I have to deal with their existence. I'm just going to be mean to them because it's more fun for me than ignoring them. Like if the choices are ignore them or be mean to them, I am going to be mean to them. And that's what I've decided. And Johnny, Johnny wore one there, I think. And so we move on.
There we go.
It's funny. But to answer your question, I very much there is the teacher in me. It's part of what I think should be more of our work as journalists, less trying to beat you in an argument, more trying to learn from our discussions. And I think that's one of the reasons I have you on, Alan, is that you and I don't agree on everything, but when we don't just shout each other down. We bring up each other's points. And if we aren't moved, we're like, okay, we've agreed to disagree, but we let the viewer take it from there. And that's kind of that. And, if one of us do, I think that's one of the things that I can like about you. Like I can show you an information. You'll be like, didn't know that. Cool. And I do the same thing. Like there's times I'm like, well, I was wrong about that one. And I'll just like that. I'll move on from that. I'll wear that as an egg on my face. I messed that up. But I think that's part of what's missing in today's joke because we're arguing all the time and everyone has to be the smartest person in the room. Everyone has to be right all the time, that it's embarrassing when you're wrong, unless you just realize you're not getting points for this. You're not stacking W's. Like you don't have wrestling championship belts for winning arguments,
I wish I did though.
I was gonna say
Zach all these credentials back here for a couple like owned a guy on Twitter.
Finish the story, Alan.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
The point being,
Chris, we appreciate you jumping in, riding shotgun with us on
in the grand tradition of Alan Saunders and Chris Carter on a podcast. We are way over time.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this has definitely been our longest one that we've had, but I kind of expected that would happen. Chris, I hope you didn't make yourself too comfortable because with the weekend ahead, we're taking a couple days off, so you got to get out of the car as soon as you tell us where the people can find you.
As always, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and all my social medias at Carter Critiques. You can read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all that, covering all things Pitt. Also, have some NFL draft analysis coming out there very soon, so keep an eye out for that. Also, as always, find me on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube, as well as the Locked On Steelers podcast, also on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. And Channel 11.
You sure?
And Channel 11.
Okay. There you go.
Final word.
Alan, tell the people they can find you.
At a Saunders_PGH on Twitter, PGH Steelers. Now, I will be on the Final Word on Sunday night at 11:35 p.m. live. So come check that out. I guess we're going to talk about, I don't know, the Super Bowl. And so come find me there. And other than that, I'm off this weekend, so you ain't going to find me at all.
Boom. See how much more tidy that was, Chris? You had your hands in too many different things. That was like a laundry list that you had to lift off. Nice to find you. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Hit us in the comments with any questions for when we come back. Thoughts on anything that we discussed today. I cannot wait for the comments on this TJ Myles stuff. Very excited for the comments on this particular video. Leave us a 5-star review, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. I'm Zachary Smith, PGH, for Chris and Alan and myself. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.